little bonus round with a little bit of a game. And we've asked on Instagram, on Nemira's page, we had a poll and we had people ask some questions. I have them written down below, so I will ask them at the end. And then we will see if anybody has other questions. So, first thing, I saw in another interview that you've mentioned that or talked about the fact that nowadays children are drawn into the weird, gothic, vibey, darkish, weird side, even though it's movies, books, TV shows, anything. And I was curious, how did you discover that?
I have two children, 7 and 9. And I think it's been interesting watching them read and watch stuff, find stuff on their own. And they're not necessarily drawn to things that have neat moral lessons. They like more complicated stuff. They like darker stuff. They like weirder stuff. I actually watched both of my kids get obsessed with Greek mythology, which happens to a lot of kids, happened to me.
It's a
I'm
canon
familiar.
event.
Yeah. And it happened to them. And I was kind of wondering why. And I feel like it's because those stories are kind of allowed to go a lot harder than children's fiction usually is. Like all of a sudden there's like, beheadings and betrayals and cheating and bastard children and like just a level of complexity and intensity that we usually keep away from children, but for some reason we decided is fine in mythology and folklore. And so I think it's interesting that that keeps appealing to kids.
As I said, it's a canon event. Been there, done
Yeah.
that. Starling House is steeped in Gothic imagery and atmosphere. What drew you to write about a haunted house in Kentucky, of all places?
Of all places, that's where I'm from. I grew up in a place very, very similar to where this book is set. And I never know how that's going to translate internationally or even just beyond Kentucky because it's supposed to be and it feels very specific to me. Um, One reason it had to be a Gothic, though, is because I feel like the Gothic is kind of set up as a genre for dealing with something that you have deep attraction to and love for, but also fear of and even hatred for. So, like when you have these competing feelings of something that you love that might be trying to kill you, that's the Gothic is what you need. And that's a little bit how I feel about my own home, which I love very deeply. I'm still homesick for it, but which can be um, impoverished, a little violent, judgmental, unfriendly to queer people, unfriendly to people who aren't white. It can be a scary place. And there's a reason that I left it, but I still miss it and love it. And so the Gothic is the only genre that can do both of those feelings at once.
Thank you. The novel mixes Gothic horror with romance and social commentary. I'm curious if I'm curious if it was easy for you to balance those genres, or was it like a challenge?
I do think the Gothic and romance go together really naturally. They've been doing that for a long time. We've,
That
we've
indeed is true.
Yeah, exactly. Like since the Gothic has emerged, it's always been pretty deeply intertwined with romance. And even one thing I think is neat about the Gothic is sometimes it's presented as very highbrow, very literature, very important, but it's also the trashy paperback novels that are very lowbrow and kind of racy and sexy. So I kind of wanted this book to get to be both because I think the Gothic has that range. And as far as adding like social commentary, I think those things are baked in too. Like I read a ton of romance. Actually, I don't know. Can you see?
Yeah,
This is my romance shelf.
amazing. 10 out of 10.
Yeah. So I read like a lot of historical romances, and none of them are free of social commentary. Some of them think they are, but they aren't, right? Like it is very baked into story how you think about what's desirable, what's romantic, what's challenging, what's a problem to be overcome, who the villain is. All those things have social commentary baked into them. So I think it just kind of goes along with it.
Okay. And on that note, because you show us, uh, three romance books you always recommend.
Ooh, three I always recommend. Let's see, what are some of my favorites? I really like Cat Sebastian. She has mostly queer romances set in historical times. Her more recent ones are sort of like almost Robin Hood-ish retellings. And I think they do a really good job of subverting, like the romantic interest in a lot of these books is often rich.
Mhm.
And in the end of the book, they end up magically marrying into the wealthy family. And hers kind of subvert that in a way that I think is really valuable. I have really liked recently, we just grab it. There's a couple of Jane Austen retellings. This one is Sex, Lies, and Sensibility by Nikki Payne. And I think of Jane Austen's books as really really good and kind of sharp social commentary, and these are the same thing. Like a lot of the retellings of Jane Austen kind of
Mhm.
focus on the vibes or on the romance or the hand touch or whatever it is. But Nikki Payne is really interested in class differences and cultural differences and how you overcome those kinds of barriers. What's another one I like? One more, I get one more. I also really like Olivia Waite, who does very classic steamy paperback romances, but they're often two women or two men, and they're smarter again about class politics in a way that I really like.
I hope everybody took notes, okay? This is very important information for our TBR. The house itself feels like a character, and I'm curious about its backstory. Does it have a backstory?
Yeah, I guess the backstory is that when how old was I? I was probably like 24. Me and my husband spent our life savings on an abandoned house that we bought in Kentucky, in rural Kentucky. And it was a complete disaster. Like the roof leaked, the electricity didn't work, the water pipes leaked. It wasn't really a livable house. Like when we bought the house, the real estate agent, as soon as we signed, she was like, "You're not gonna live in it, are you?" And we were like, "Yeah, yeah, we're gonna live in it." And we fixed it up ourselves on almost no money. We were living at about the poverty line. And so we were like scrapping materials and doing things ourselves. And it was really hard and really fun. And I feel like anybody who's worked on an old house for any amount of time feels like it is alive and it is sometimes your enemy and sometimes your friend. And so I put a lot of my feelings about that house into Starling House.
It has character.
Yeah.
Can you describe a day in your life when you're locked in, like when you're writing your book, for example? How is it going?
I haven't been locked in a while. So uh, the thing is that I have two kids and we like to spend a lot of time together as a family. So even my most locked in day is pretty much like I get up at 6 with the kids, I get them to school, I write for 3 or 4 hours, I deal with emails the rest of the time. And then once they're home from school, I am pretty much hanging out with them. We are doing board games, we are going to soccer, we are watching movies. It's the greatest privilege of my life that I've gotten to have a job that lets me pursue this dream that I've always had, but also not miss any time with my kids. It's like no one is that lucky, and I am.
So I can assume that you've always wanted to be a writer.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny when I talk to other writers about this because I think mostly we all started actually as readers, right? Like
Mhm.
that's nobody wants to be a writer unless they're a really intense reader. And it's almost like a symptom of that. If you read enough books intensely enough, young enough, you're like, well, I guess the only way to make this my job is if I become a writer. So I think that's how I got here.
Did you read a certain book that made your brain go like, I want to do that?
Yeah, I don't know if it was one specific one. I definitely like every year or so would hit a book that I was like, oh my goodness, this is my new favorite book. For a while, it was Watership Down when
Mm-hmm.
I was young, and I am now getting to read that out loud to both of my kids. We're reading that at night, and it still hits. I was right. That book is great.
Readers describe your writing style as lyrical and immersive, whimsical. What are or who are you reading to get that inspiration from?
That's a really good question because I feel like um, that is the only formal education I've had in writing is through reading and paying attention at the prose level to what other writers are doing. Sometimes people ask me for like exercises or practices or like how do you get good at writing? And the only formal exercise I've ever done is to rewrite passages from other books. Like literally just have the book and type out the words or write them out by hand, and it teaches you a lot about like the choices they're making at the individual word level, not just like the plot or the story or the themes, but like you have so much power over each individual word. So some of the writers that I think exercise that control the most interestingly are like Shirley Jackson, obviously, maybe. I think in particular, she just has like a rhythm to her prose that is really unique and very intentional. And sometimes it can be abrupt or startling, but it's always on purpose. Nicola Griffith, who is maybe not as well known, but she has just everything she's ever written is pretty amazing to me. She did those two big historical epics, Hild, um, is the first one, and Meanwood is the second. And I just think that she has a similar like rhythmic power. Le Guin, maybe obviously. I actually have been finding a lot of beauty in again, this is my little obsession right now, but like older romance writing when it was allowed to be like more flowery and
Yeah,
more intense and sometimes like have long half a page long metaphors. Some of that's really over the top and kind of purple, but some of it is really beautiful. And I think I admire a lot from writers who existed in a pre-social media world under different market pressures where they were maybe allowed to take their time more.
yeah. I will go back a little bit with and talk about your character, Opal. She's such a resilient yet flawed character, not all the way. How did she take shape in your mind? And what part of her was the hardest to write or the easiest?
Yeah, I don't know how popular, like, if your market there ever had that era of Gothic novels where there's like a woman running from a house in like a
Yeah,
white dress.
we
Okay.
had that.
Yeah, where it's like, and so that era of the Gothic is very much about this like innocent young woman who is like sucked into a world beyond her understanding, who is often taken advantage of by like an older or a dark, shadowy male figure or something like that. And it has a lot to do with like innocence and um her essential goodness and corruption and like these kinds of questions. And I think those are boring and gendered and I didn't like them. So I wanted to make a gothic heroine who was canny and mean and maybe a little manipulative and knew what she wanted and was entering into this relationship with like intention and agency rather than like, oh my goodness, what's the mystery of this house? Maybe I can fix him. Like I wanted a much harder, edgier female character.
Thank you. Your favorite character, if
The
you can
cat.
tell us.
Obviously. Whoever I didn't have to write dialogue for. No, that's not true. I've been realizing recently that a lot of my books and stories end up having like a middle-aged character on the side who is sort of like tired and rolling their eyes a lot and is like, oh my gosh, these kids and their stupid choices. I really am starting to relate to the middle-aged character more. I'm a little exhausted by the antics of these young people. So Bev in Starling House was my tired middle-aged observer.
And the last question, no, I have two more, but the next one is, what was there a moment in your writing process while writing Starling House when you thought, mm, this won't hit, or this isn't it, and you wanted another story, another direction, another plot?
Yeah, all the time. I'm a really slow writer, and I think that pretty much every scene, sometimes every sentence on a bad day, I write it and I'm like, that's not it. Or it's close. There's pieces of it that are right, but I feel like what my whole process ends up being is like, all right, you sort of touched it there, but how can I make it like 300 times more intense? If this is a scary scene, it needs to be scarier. If it's romantic, it needs to be more romantic. Like to just intensify and to turn up the dials on everything is a goal of mine. But I also feel like the most intimidating thing about writing a novel is that all the choices are open to you. And so like second guessing those choices and making sure that what you're doing is on purpose to a specific end is like the part of drafting. You have to constantly be questioning yourself, which is really exhausting.
And my last question, what's next?
Um, what's next I think I have a copy right here.
Oh my gosh, let's go.
Is this one. The next
I
novel
love
that's
the
coming
film.
out is The Everlasting, which is my Lady Knight novel. I don't know if you were a Tamora Pierce reader when you were young or like anything where there was a girl with a sword. Like I was a big fan of any of those genres, and so this is my grown-up version of that.
I'm excited for it. I think we all are. Um, we're going now to play that little game. It's Never Have I Never, a bonus round. And then if you're okay, I'm gonna tell you the questions from your readers.
Of
And
course.
if any of you have other questions, let them below. I will read them. First thing, never have I ever stayed overnight in a haunted house.
Okay, look. I don't really believe in haunted houses, which is funny. Like I wrote a witch book and people were like, do you know any actual witchcraft? And I was like, oh, I don't believe in any of that. I'm really sorry. I'm like pretty boring and practical about it. Which means that I've definitely slept in houses where people are like, oh my God, you can't stay in that. That's like so creepy. There's definitely a ghost in here. Like it just doesn't hit me. So like I'm fine. Yes.
Never have I ever deleted an entire draft accidentally.
I just did. I just did. No, it wasn't the whole thing. It wasn't the whole thing, but it was like 3 chapters of what I'm working on now. My computer froze and it turned it into like
Oh.
gobbledygook. It was a nightmare. And I back it up regularly? I do not. I do not. So I'm trying to learn my lesson from that.
Did you panic?
I totally panicked. I cried. My husband had to take me on a walk outside to like calm down. Yeah, but it's fine. I rewrote
Nice,
it.
nice.
It's not the end of the world. It's probably better for the draft that I rewrote it.
Never have I ever turned in a manuscript late.
Does it count if you ask for more time ahead of time? I've never missed a deadline, but I have moved a deadline like a
Yeah,
couple
it
months
counts.
ahead of
It
that.
counts. Never have I never Googled myself.
Oh, I do that every day. It's really
For real?
unhealthy. It's really unhealthy.
Oh my God, are you reading your reviews on Google?
I try to just let myself look at the like rating and not specific reviews because it's really not my business. I know it's not healthy. I'm trying. I think every single book release, I go through a phase of being so nervous about what people are saying that I can't help myself and I start looking a lot. And then Once it comes out, I become sane again. I leave it alone.
I think if I were in your shoes, I would look up. I'm too curious for my own good.
I will say my son won $1 at school because he bet another kid. He was like, my mom has a wiki page. And this kid was like, no, she doesn't.
Oh my gosh, that's such a diva move. I love that. I love that so much. And last question, never have I ever imagined an alternative career or other than writing.
Oh my
But
gosh. Hasn't every writer imagined like you get stuck in a draft or you get like a bad review or something and you're like, maybe I could be a post office worker. Maybe I could quit and go be a teacher again. Like I fantasize all the time about other lives and other careers, but I do think that's part of the job in some ways. You have to imagine other ways of being.
can you give us an example of what you imagine?
Yeah. I used to teach American history. And so I sometimes think about that because I really liked teaching, actually. I liked telling people. It turns out teaching history is a lot like telling stories, like
Mhm.
up in front of people, but with more footnotes. I think about getting to do that again. I imagine teaching writing sometimes because I've never gotten to do that. And I miss teaching. I like writing. I'm like, I think I could work on this. What else? I used to want to be an academic. I have my master's in history, and I was like, oh, I should keep going and I could get my PhD. I don't dream about that as often anymore.
Those were my questions. Now I'm gonna ask, or well, tell you the questions from your readers. If you could walk through one of your own doors into another world, would you? And would you come back?
Is it like any other world?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the idea. I think that was why my first book had doors in it, is because it's not a permanent commitment. If it's a door, you can go back through it. And it's sort of the Narnia of appeal of like one afternoon you could just slip into this other world and have this whole adventure, maybe even a whole life, and then still get to come back home and be like cozy and normal. That's hugely appealing to me.
I've only read Starling House. Which one of your books would you recommend to read next?
Oh, interesting. Hmm. It really depends on what mood you're in. Like, if you liked the sort of slightly feminist anger and resentment in Starling House, the undercurrent, that I would do Once and Future Witches. If you liked the more whimsical and magical side of it, then maybe 10,000 Doors. Or if you liked the history sections of Starling House, um, then 10,000 Doors. And if you liked the pieces of it that were more like a fairy tale, then I have novellas that are fairy tale retellings.
Um, what's the book you recommend the most to your friends?
Ooh. What have I been trying to get everyone to read? I mean, I think all of my friends have now read it, and so they're free from me. I'll leave them alone. But Gideon the Ninth, the Locked Tomb books, I've made, I think, everyone in my whole family and friend group read those books.
Have you experienced writer's block? Any tips?
I don't know if it's fully writer's block because it's not like there's been a period where I like truly couldn't write, but there's been periods where I could tell it's wrong. Like it's not coming out the way that I want it to. I feel like I'm slogging along. I might be adding words, but that it's not giving me that satisfying feeling. And usually that's a sign that I've taken a wrong turn somewhere behind me. I almost always end that phase by rewriting everything that I've written so far. And so that's not, and I think that's why I resist it so long. I'm like, no, no, no. If I just keep going, it's going to be fine. It's going to feel fine, but it's not. And I have to rewrite the whole thing.
Uh, what's one line you're secretly proud of writing?
Mm, I don't know. I like some of my lines. I have a short story. I have several short stories. And I feel like my best lines are in my short fiction. Maybe because each sentence has so much more weight on it when it's in a short format. So there's a couple lines from the Six Deaths of the Saint that I am pretty proud of.
Good question. What's one question you wish people ask you more often?
Oh, I don't know if I have one. I feel like people's questions are mostly very, very good.
Or are you tired of a certain question? Like, oh, not this again.
I think the one that I never know how to answer is sort of like, where do you get your ideas or what's your inspiration? Because it's such a long and complicated answer. It's not like I just walk around and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I know what my next book is going to be. It takes me weeks to come up with the next book idea, or years probably of like life experience and books I've read, and everything has to like accumulate over time in a way that I find like hard to articulate in a short way.
Did any side characters in any of your books surprise you by becoming larger or more important than you first imagined?
They almost all are more important than I first imagined, because when I outline the book, their role is often like something practical that I need them to exist to do XYZ to move the plot along. And then as you're writing, you're like, oh my God, it's a whole person. And you have to meet this person, and you have to think seriously about, but why would they be doing that? Why are they here? What's their backstory? And so like usually they grow or at least become more interesting after I've started writing them than they originally began.
How did you come up with your book cover?
I don't come up with any of the book covers. I usually, what happens is that my editor is like, do you have any ideas for a book cover? And I'm like, yes, I have lots. And I send her a document with all these cool pictures and all this, like Pinterest stuff. And then she's like, great, I'll send that to our artists. And they don't use any of that because they're real artists and they have their own vision. And they've been right every time. Like I've been very lucky in my covers. Thank goodness they don't listen to me. Um, and after that, I only get like veto power. Like if I really don't like the cover, I can say that and they're willing to work with me.
Mhm. Since being in a romance book phase, have you considered writing a contemporary romance or a retelling of a favorite classic romance book?
I've thought about it. It wouldn't be contemporary though. I read almost exclusively historicals. I've thought about historical romance. And I might have agreed to do a novella for one like next year. But I don't know if that was like a wise choice. Somebody just was in my Instagram DMs and was like, "We're doing a collection of historical romance novellas. You should do one." And then I was very tempted. So maybe, maybe.
This is entirely my personal interest. What do you think of Tessa Dare's books, and do they deserve the Bridgerton treatment with less writing between seasons? With less waiting between
What was
seasons?
the author's name?
Tessa Dare.
Oh, Tessa Dare. She's very fun. I feel like Tessa Dare will never let you down. And to be honest, I am not the Bridgerton books are not for me.
Mm.
Um, in general, the historical romances I read, I need them to be higher stakes than just like, oh, but she'll be ruined. It can't just be social ruin. I need like pirates or like highwaymen, kidnappings, a war. Like I really want things to be
I'm
pretty
dying
intense.
tomorrow. Save me.
Exactly, exactly. I need some really high stakes. Tessa Dare would be good. Courtney Milan would be great if we're doing TV adaptations of historical romances. Hers are more in the Victorian era, and they have like histories of scientific discoveries or like the suffrage movement. They're more interesting histories to pull on, whereas Bridgerton is not interested in actual history at all.
In 10,000 Doors of January, January's story is about finding and claiming identity. How much of her journey reflects your own search for voice as a writer?
Hmm. Yeah, I think the funny thing is, as I'm writing, I never think my characters are about me. And then when I go back to read the book later, I'm like, oh, I was working through some of my own stuff. I think everything you write is like an exaggerated or a version of something you've experienced in your own life made huge, and you use these little seeds of real things, however small they were, to build your characters. And so I don't think it's coincidental that January starts out just like very, very isolated and very different feeling and very uncertain of what her home is and where she is. And that I grew up like moving around a lot, homeschooled some of the time without a lot of friends. And it took me a while to like leave home and discover like who I actually am and where I want to be and who my people are. That took like mine is obviously not an epic fantasy journey, but those feelings are definitely went into January.
Thank you. Do you have a favorite and least favorite book trope?
Hmm. I don't know if I have a least favorite because I feel like even ones that I'm suspicious of or skeptical of could be done in ways that are interesting. Like the one that popped to mind for my least favorite is a chosen one situation. Like whenever there's like a hero that there's a prophecy about, they're supposed to be the one who can save the whatever, or they're born the heir to something and they're just like a special magical perfect person. Like I'm a little tired of that. I'm skeptical of it as a political project because I think it tends to lend itself to the idea that there are some people who are just more special, more powerful, more entitled than others. I don't like it, but a good enough author could convince me that it's actually really tight and cool. My favorite tropes, I mean, a lot of romance tropes I just really like. Enemies to lovers is great. Um, I like smaller ones, like little cliches within genres. So like I love it in a romance novel or a fantasy novel when they're like doing a mission and they're like, "Oh my gosh, the guards are coming. We have to kiss." So they don't think that we're up to anything. Whenever there's a manufactured reason like that, and it's like, well, we could pretend to be doing something else. No, 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 no. Only the kissing could possibly work.
This specific
It,
thing.
it has to
And
be.
you talk about Gothic earlier. How do you see vampires after all those reinterpretations in the last 10 years? Are they still worth exploring? I personally am obsessed with this type of creatures. I would like to know if you feel there is still room for new versions.
Of course. Nothing is ever tired or worn out. And every now and then in publishing circles, they announce like, oh, we're tired of vampire stories, or no more werewolves, or no more zombies, or whatever the trend is. But that's never true because like a good enough writer, a creative enough writer always has a new take on it. Like I mean, people have been retelling the same stories for literal thousands of years. So the idea that we could suddenly be done with vampires is ridiculous to me. And in particular, I don't know if the movie Sinners has been popular over there. You guys seen it?
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like that discussion is done now. Like vampires, please do more because that was an incredible movie with some very old concepts in it, done in some really new and interesting ways. So of course there's more room.
Which part of writing is hardest for you? Beginnings, middles, or endings?
Beginnings. I think what we were talking about earlier, with the intimidating thing about writing being that there are so many different choices that could be made. The beginning is where you have the most of those choices. And as you move through a draft, you're sort of eliminating different branches and different possibilities, and you're more and more certain of like what this book is that you are doing, what you're headed towards. And so at the beginning, when it's just a wide open field, you don't have the tone right, you don't have the characters, you don't know how your dialogue is going to work or what the structure is going to be, even if you've outlined it to death, which I always do. There's so many choices that it's really slow and intimidating for me.
Are you interested in writing a romantic book?
Um, Probably not one that fits in the exact definition of. I think all my books have some romance in them and they have some fantasy in them. So by that definition, I am writing romantasy, but it's also become a more specific idea in the last couple of years where it's a kind of a certain set of tropes, a certain tone, a certain writing expectation that I don't know if I would want to play in like that narrow of a field. I think my next book has a lot of romance in it, actually. But I don't necessarily think that it would hit perfectly well with romantasy readers. I mean, we'll see.
This question is a little bit more deep, if I may say so. You said you love romance books. Do you feel like the romance genre is turning into fast fashion?
Fast fashion.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. What's funny is the romance books I'm reading are almost all about 10 to 15 years old. I'm reading previous generations fast fashion. I think whenever there's a genre that gets quickly popular, there can be a decline in quality. I'm not saying that there always is or calling out any specific books or anything, but I think publishing is a corporate
Mm-hmm.
project. And so they just want often to turn out as many books in a popular or hot genre as they can. And I think that that's not really totally fair to the editors or to the authors who are trying their best, but like when there's this big rush, books get acquired faster, they get edited faster, the sequel gets bought up quickly. Like I don't think that encourages the best possible quality. But this always happens with whatever is trendy. And I do think there's a little bit more of a critique of romantasy and of romance than there is of other genres. Like, there were a million Game of Thrones copycats after Game of Thrones. And you didn't see as many articles about, like, what's happening to young women? Are they all being, like, brainwashed into, so like I think that there's a little bit more harsher of a critique on these books and their quality than there has been on previous trends. It's like pretty unfair and pretty gendered in its where it's coming from.
Do you see connections between your books like a thread that ties them all together?
I don't know. That's a good question because I don't write series like a lot of fantasy writers have these big long series or interconnected worlds, which I think is really cool. And all of mine are standalones. What I'll say is there's usually something in each book, like a small thing that leads me to the next thing, the next book, right? So like in 10,000 Doors, I have a very casual mention of like what witches are. Or like that must be what a witch is someone that men are afraid of. And that became my witch book. And in witches, I did some retellings of fairy tales that I thought were so fun that I did two more novellas that are fairy tale retellings. Um, so like each there's usually, and I think it's just like how art works, I think it's how people work, is that like the things you are interested in will lead you onto your next like thematic. So maybe it is like a thread. Maybe that's a really good description.
Mhm. Can you give us a bookish hot take? Spill some tea.
You were trying to get me in trouble. Interesting.
Not my question.
Interesting. My bookish hot take is that publishers said that they wanted more diverse and more queer books in around 2020 and maybe a little bit before that. And it turns out they only meant that in as for as long as it was profitable and easy. And they are happily abandoning those authors now. And I think that's a bummer.
Damn, that's hot.
Oops, sorry.
No worries. Do you have any rituals, places, or habits that sparks creativity when you're stuck?
One second, I'm seeing if my camera will come back.
Yeah, no worries, sorry.
Now you should try and say one of your bookish hot takes.
Oh yeah, you get in trouble.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Hot take. On the spot, I can't think of anything. But I agree with the statement that romance books are getting a lot of hate for no reason, like just because it's centered around women, and it's a genre that is popular with us, let's say, and that's not fair. Like that's not fair. Also, You never see like the boys when are playing video games. You don't see articles like, my gosh, they're turning into murderers, and I'm reading a romance book. You're brainwashed. She's gone, boys. She's gone. Like, what do you mean?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, you don't see these big takedowns of how like spy novels or murder mysteries are like poisoning men's brains, but you do see a lot of takes about how romance is like giving women these problematic fantasies, and they don't understand that what they're reading is actually going to give them totally unrealistic expectations. Like, first of all, maybe you all should improve your behavior. Maybe our expectations are not the problem.
Also, I saw another statement that I agree with it. Uh, let's say years before, a long time ago, reading and writing was seen as something smart, something that was very not popular but high in society. Like you were like, oh my God. But now with the rise of social media and book talk and bookstagram, and the fact that more women are coming into this domain, and we see a lot of creators that are women, suddenly book talk is toxic. They're always recommending the worst books, and I don't know, now it's seen as something shameful.
Yeah.
But just a couple of years ago, because it was male dominated, oh my God, you're reading, so smart.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you're reading,
Well, and what I think is interesting is that exact discourse has existed since novels have existed, right? So novels are this incredible art form. They're very highbrow. They're very important. The people who write them are important. And then Jane Austen gets a little too popular. And there's a
yeah,
number,
exactly.
and then all of a sudden critics are like, these novels, what are they doing to our national character? That's not what you should be
Exactly.
reading. We didn't mean that.
Yeah. Are you friends with any contemporary authors? At the last edition of FestivalYA, Ava Reid has mentioned you a lot and recommended us Starling Night House. Sorry.
Yeah, I love Ava Reid. I don't know them personally that well, but like we talk a little bit on social media, and I just admire their work so much. I think I don't really know how she writes that quickly, that well
Like she's
at
running
that
out of
level.
time.
I find that a little annoying, but what she's doing, the range that she has, I think is wonderful. I have a number of author friends. I don't want to out my group chats, but like I used to live in Kentucky pretty close to Lee Mandello. I don't know if you know his work, but he does just awesome horror adjacent sorts of books that I really love. I really look forward to whatever Olive E. Blake writes next. She's another one who's writing insanely fast. And each book I'm like, well, this one must have been rushed, right? But then it's really good. So yeah.
And one last question. In relation to the sixth death of the saint, the whole world feels vast, yet in reality the number of pages is quite short. How did you manage to say so much within such small frames? How did you decide what to leave unsaid?
I think that's always the question of short fiction, is how do you decide what to leave unsaid? And I used one of the cheat codes for short stories in that one, which is that you can pull on reader expectations when you use a pretty established setting. So as soon as I say there's a knight or a prince, readers fill that in. They are picturing a faux medieval world. You don't really have to spend too much time being like, it's actually a pre-capitalistic feudal society. None of that matters. They're interested in what you're doing with these familiar characters. So I often think for short fiction, you could do a really cool world or you can do really unique stuff with the characters. You often can't do both. You don't have the space. So you're kind of choosing a very specific thing that you want to convey. And with that story, probably the reason that like it feels like, there's kind of a lot going on here, is that short story was the road test for this book. Like I had this book started, I was struggling through a draft and then tried to do a condensed version. So if it feels condensed, that's because it is.
Do we have a release date for your next book?
This one comes out in the US on October 28th. So a
We
month.
actually do have a question about it. The Everlasting comes out very soon. Is it similar to your other books?
Yes and no. I think there is still that thread. Like, for instance, apparently I am always writing about stories, and like the sort of like there is the story, but then there's also the story within the story, or it's about how we use and manipulate narratives. I think in some ways 10,000 Doors of January you could look at as being like the power of stories with a smiley face, and this one is a little bit the power of stories with a frowny face. It's kind of about like how they can be deployed as national propaganda, and how like our folklore, in this case, a story that kind of echoes King Arthur type stories, how our folklore can be deployed to justify atrocities and nationalism and empire later on. Yeah. So it's similar in that thematically I'm doing the same things. I think it's tonally a little bit darker, a little bit more adult, I would say. Like many of my books, I would not really hesitate to hand them to YA readers. I think that's great crossover. I would hesitate a little bit to give this one to specifically YA readers.
And those were all the questions. Thank you so much.
I do
That
have
was
one
real delight.
question,
Yeah.
which is also sort of my hot take for the night, is the fact that I don't think authors should be forced to do social media so intensely as they are asked to do it now. I feel like you should be left to write and enjoy your writing process and your creative mindset, and not have like this little tab in your mind that, oh, I have to make a TikTok because that sound is viral now and
Mhm.
the publisher needs it. So how do you balance this exiting your creative space and having to do social media and uh, the most viral sound
Yeah.
it's now?
I think it's hard for me to answer because I do come from a place of real privilege, which is that I'm not a debut in this environment. I have a pretty decent track record in sales, so that the pressure I'm getting to do those kinds of things, I think is a lot less than other writers are getting. Like if I deleted all of my social media accounts, my publisher would be sad, but not that sad. I'm also not that good at social media, so it's not that it's some authors I think are in a real trap where they've built their career on their accessibility, their presence, their funniness on different platforms. And then they're stuck continually having to do that. And I think I'm just very lucky in that I wasn't really. So my balance, my rule is that I could do whatever I think is fun and funny, but I don't have to try to go viral or chase trends or like really know how to use TikTok at all. I don't have that app on my phone. But I got one email from a publicist once that was like, "Hey, we think you should make a TikTok account." And I was just like, "No." And so I can do what feels fun and easy and natural, but it's not something I want to find myself spending a lot of time onto. Like I'm not an influencer. I don't have that skill set. I don't want that skill set. And so I have the privilege of getting to mostly spend my time writing.
That's amazing. And I'm very happy for you that you can have this like peace of mind and don't have to. It's so amazing. Some of us that do have TikTok are wishing to have your life. Some because we're stuck in that loop of having to be there. But
Yeah.
The
And
brain rot
really,
is not a joke. The brain rot
well,
is real.
and for me, like I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram, and just the level of news and information I see on those is sometimes overwhelming to me. And I'm like, wow, I need to get off of this just because um at least where I am in my country, the news is universally bad. Every day there's like 5 new horrific headlines that are like documented human rights abuses, acts of genocide, it's horrifying to exist in, and like I can't be a mom and a writer and be exposed to that level of hideousness all the time.
There's same thing goes here. We're being active online. We see all the news around the world, and there was a meme with everybody being like, "I'm tired of this grandpa that's too damn bad," and here we
The
are.
holes, yes.
I need a break. I need one good news.
Actually, I've used that meme to describe this book because they're stuck in a time loop. So they're repeating it over and over again. Yeah, exactly.
Anina says you can make an Instagram feed that gives you only nice things, but then you have to train it. And you
Yeah,
still
and
have to
that's
be stuck in
equally
the brain
false.
rot.
Like, we also do live in a world of atrocities right now, and I don't want to ignore that, but I also can't marinate my brain in it. So I think I
Yeah.
just have to be on my phone less. I'm also like, I am on my phone too much. I'm like telling myself right now that I need to be on less.
Yeah. I think that's it.
All right, well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for
Thank
being
you
with
for
us. Thank you to Nemira for making the connection between FestivalYA and yourself. And thank you for being here to talk to us about your books. And we can't wait for your next book. And who knows, maybe next year we'll see each other
Yeah.
and talk about that one, even though you said it wasn't really meant for young adults.
Well,
we'll
that'll
see.
never stop young readers. Like, I just wouldn't want to be seen giving it to them, right? Like what they find on their own.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much. This was a real privilege.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone who was here with us. And we'll see you in the next ones.
Bye.
Bye.